guys, Derek here with the Risky Business Podcast. Our guest today is Mr. Matt Topper. Matt has a long history in the IT business. He and I got into the MSP field at about the same time in 2010, but Matt was in the IT field directly since 2005. Matt, you actually have a podcast that I want to talk about a little bit before we get fully started here, but it's worth mentioning that at my managed services company, we have a really good sales team, a really good marketing team, and we're always going back and talking to prospects who didn't work with us even after they decided to not work with us, right? And when we get in front of somebody, our team has a close rate of about 80%, which sounds crazy and it sounds like it's absolute garbage, but it's real. And the reason is we have a really good process for qualifying businesses, right? So before we go out and meet with the business, we've already done our homework. We've already made sure that this is a good fit. So if you find our team standing in your office, there's a 100% chance that it is a good fit because our team's already checked. We have about an 80% close rate at that point because still, 1 out of 5 will say, nah, we're not going to do it. We think our IT guy has us covered. We're good. So we're not a huge company. So we have a trickle of leads that come in. So we're doing half a dozen, maybe a dozen assessments in a month. But in the last 3 months, we've maintained our 80% close rate, right? So we've had maybe 5 or 6 people tell us, no, we don't want to do an assessment. That's how we start off all of our relationships, knowing what your risk posture is, knowing where you are, and knowing what your risk posture is, knowing where you are. And in that last 3 months, this first quarter, we've had maybe 5 or 6 people just say, we're not going to do it right now. We think we're good. 2 of those people have contacted us this week, one on Monday and one on Wednesday. And both of them are owned. And what I mean by owned is they have been hacked and extorted to the point where both of them actually have completely lost control of their Microsoft 365 accounts. That's all of their emails. That's everything. And one of them is experiencing extortion, where basically the hacker has obtained information about the owner of the company and is threatening to send out that information to all their clients. And the information is accurate. It's true. It is what it is. And they're basically holding a gun to his head. The other is a cyber insurance agent. This guy is an expert on all things cyber insurance. And we did our best to educate them on, what we should be doing. Hey, I know you think you have all this covered, but you really need to have a second opinion. We welcome any second opinions to come into any of our clients. We welcome any of our clients to do a cybersecurity risk assessment at any time, even if it's not us conducting it. And we also have third parties who come in and do them for us, right? Where we have no control over it. They come in, they give us a report card, and our customers see that. Really kind of helps to hold us accountable, right? So we would rather have that done ourselves than have somebody come in and do it to us, right? So, but both of these companies are in a position now where they are no longer the decision maker with regards to their IT and cybersecurity decision-making process. They are no longer in charge. And their business, their list of customers is now owned by a cyber criminal, which essentially means their business is owned by a cyber criminal. So this is a really low rate of people who say they don't want to do a risk assessment, and a really high rate of people who think they have it together, who call us and then they're begging us for help, and they're throwing themselves on the altar, begging for help and begging for mercy. And it's like, there's really not much to do after the fact. Like, prepare yourself to have all of your customers get this information about you. Prepare yourself to not get this money back in your bank account. Prepare yourself for the worst case scenario. In this scenario, you're probably not going to be covered by your insurance. So this is one of those things where we are working, and that's part of what this podcast is. Yesterday I had a meeting with a private equity firm that's got 500 seats. They're all over the country. We're doing a risk assessment for them. Last week we had a meeting with a medical company. They've got 13 locations, 400 employees. We're doing a risk assessment for them. earlier this week, we're working with a medical company that does. I won't say too much about it because it'll give away exactly who they are if I tell you what they do. But they're the largest in the world, and we're doing a risk assessment for them. But today, I'm going to a trailer park where it's a 55 and older community, and we're getting up and talking for a half hour about how these people can help prevent being hacked, because the people that are on that end of this are the people that are getting hurt, right? So I don't care who will listen. I will talk to them. I don't care if they have a job, they don't have a job, if they're, old, young, rich, poor, it doesn't matter. Our job at this point is to educate people and get the word out as fast as possible. And that's why I really thank you, Matt, for being here today to talk about some of the technical side and really how this affects business owners, because sometimes people need to hear it from more than one person. And I think this is a really valid way of doing that. So I applaud you for taking time out of your busy schedule to do this. I thank you so much for coming on with us. So talk a little bit about your podcast and what your goals are, who your audience is, and what it's going to be about.
Yeah, so first, thanks for having me on. I love making these connections and having the opportunity to speak with people and talk about important security topics. So at ConnectWise, our podcast is called Resilience Rocket, and only partially because the domain name was available when we started thinking of podcast names. The goal is to think of security in the context of business resilience. The idea that your business continues to operate tomorrow the way it was working today. That's the ultimate goal when it comes to security. All this stuff about what tools to purchase, what services to use, what secure configurations, all of those are vehicles towards achieving that goal, towards making sure that you can continue to operate and stay in business, right? That's what we're trying to do. And that's what we're trying to do with this podcast, is try and reframe this rut we've gotten into as an industry of thinking of security as filling up a proverbial bucket with the right tools and following the right checklists, and now you're secure. It's really a mindset as far as how you're framing decisions and how you're thinking about what actions to take. And when it comes to tools, thinking about what tools to use and how to configure them, but all in the context of, I want to stay in business and do so securely. And we want our audience to forget about just, hey, tell me what stuff to buy. And we want to get more into, here's how you figure out what you need to do. So that's the goal. Resilience Rocket, part of ConnectWise's marketing and efforts. We'll be talking more about that at IT Nation Secure this June.
Business owners need to take a different look or have a different perspective about cybersecurity. So as the world around us is changing, as cybercrime is doing a hockey stick right to the moon, right? If you think Dogecoin went to the moon, take a look at the
right.
Take a look at the cybersecurity statistics that are out there, cybercrime statistics. We've got $6 trillion have been collected by ransomware thieves, and they're expecting that number to hit 10.5 trillion by the end of this year, was one of the big projections that we saw. But when a owner of a business, you don't really understand that scenario until you're in it, right? The day that you go into your office and you can't get into your email anymore, and a customer calls you and says, "Did you? I got an email that says you sent wiring you changed our wiring instructions for sending our insurance premium payments. We didn't send that out." Right? And then you start figuring out that you've got 800 people on a list that just got that information, and only one of them actually called you. So out of that list, how many people are wiring money to the wrong bank account? It's your account that got hacked. It's your fault that this is happening on as far as liability goes, because it was your email that got hacked. Is your insurance going to cover you? Is your IT team going to be able to recover you? It's not something that you want to do the first time in a real world experience.
Yes.
This is something that you want to do in a simulated, safe environment where you can test, where you can assess, where you can see what your teams are doing. You want to put phishing emails in front of your teams that are from your training system. You want that to be a game without any real world consequences. That's how you want to
Right.
train your employees, and not learning from firsthand experience where you either lose your business, like 60% of the businesses that this happens to, 60% of them shut down within 6 months. So, do you want to learn it that way, or do you want to pay a couple $1,000s to have a team come in and do an assessment and tell you where your holes in your boat are? Right? A lot of people think with the cyber insurance and stuff they're covered. They're not. This one of these examples I just brought up is a guy who sells cyber insurance. This guy was the one who told me that the statistic about 90% of insurance claims on cyber liability policies are being denied.
Yeah.
That was information that this guy shared with me, and now he's on the victim side of this, right? So he didn't listen enough to his own preaching, and now he's stuck in this situation. So having multiple opinions, having multiple different parties looking at your cybersecurity, and I don't care if you run a tire shop. If you've got a tire shop that's been open for 30 years, that list of customers that you've had coming in and out of there and getting rotations and oil changes and new tires, that list is going to cost you your business when a cyber attack takes it from you, when a hacker takes it from
Yeah. So you're describing a couple of things that I like to talk to customers and partners about. And one of them is the answer to your question of would you rather learn this on the fly or prepare is the answer is both, really, right? So you have on the one hand your assessments, your third party assessments, anyone who could come in, your regulatory frameworks, anything that you're required to do. But along with that, one of the best preparatory steps you can take is to do tabletop exercises. And I know everyone hears that and, kind of shudders at the extreme formality these involve, right? If you read the NIST papers or the C any of the government papers on this, they talk about months and quarters of plannings for these things. But it doesn't have to be that way. If you're a smaller organization or you're just getting your security program off the ground, take half an hour and start simulate what would we do if our PCs got ransomware, if someone got into our 365 environment, and just simulate that. Just ask the question. You don't have to write reams and reams of reports about this, but take the time now to think about questions like what would we tell our customers? At what point do we involve insurance? Do we have to have an outside incident response firm? Okay, we do. Who's that going to be? It's not the kind of thing you look up in the yellow pages as it's going on. It's the kind of thing you spend some time meeting with and thinking about what we're going to do. Do you have an MSP? What's their role in your incident response plan? Do they take over the whole thing? Do they work with insurance? Do you have insurance that's going to cover this? Have all of those kinds of discussions beforehand when it's okay to fail. The other part with that is you talked about the tire shop as an example, and you also talked about a huge medical healthcare type company. And the reality is that those organizations have different risk profiles and different things that are risky to them. And so when you're thinking the context of risk as a business owner, remember that there's always risk doesn't exist in a vacuum. There's a risk to something, right? There's not just risk as this ethereal concept that just exists out in the ether. It's a risk to what are my most secure assets or my most critical assets. Not everything is the same. So if you're, just take an example, your internal payroll system, you might decide that that's a lot less important than your patient information if you're a hospital, right? Or if you're a tire shop, you might not care at all if your HR, I mean, you probably do, but you might care less about your HR system getting breached than your customer records. And the point of doing that is that not everything can be protected with the same level of resources. There's only so much security budget to go around.
you. Yeah, like we have a client that is ITAR, so that's International Trade of Arms Regulations. So these guys have ITAR files that are on a server that we don't even have access to. So it's a totally separate, segregated thing. They've got a 30 employee company, but only 3 of the employees actually have access to those files because those are the ones working on, those ITAR projects. But
Right. And
obviously,
there's probably a lot of time spent on like data flow diagrams to figure out who could access to what and how to make sure you couldn't touch it.
yeah, and we're looking at, how do we direct the attention to these super sensitive files that if they were to get stolen, we've got a national security issue. Um, you know, but not putting an overlay over their entire network and basically cramping everybody's style and dropping user productivity through the floor, right? So,
Right. Right.
there's always a balance there where you don't want, when you go into a secure building, there's a secure building and there's more secure areas and there's extremely secure areas, and you have to treat the networks the same way. So there's certain policies that you want to make sure that you're putting in place to cover, the entirety of the network, right? As far as your, security awareness training, people
Hmm.
signing in and out at the front door of the building for physical security. You can't plug a flash drive into any of their machines and download anything. Like kind of blanket policies for the entire network, but then also paying special attention to that really proprietary stuff. But most of these businesses that we go into don't know where that data is. They don't know, what actual physical machine it's being stored on. Um, even small accounting firms or insurance agencies, like, well, what are you guys using for accounting software? Well, QuickBooks. Well, where's your QuickBooks file at?
Right.
I don't know. That one maybe. This one over here. Like all 3 of us use it, so it's got to be on one of those, right? And then you
Yeah.
find out.
Hopefully on the server.
Yeah, and then you find out it's in a server in the closet they don't even know they had. So, not knowing what your data risk is a huge vulnerability for most of these customers. We're always hearing you know, it's all in the cloud. I'm not worried about it. It's all in Salesforce or it's all on SharePoint or Dropbox, for God's sake. Like you hear
I mean, if,
these
if you're
things.
sure of that, that's not so bad, but it sounds like a guess in most cases from what you're describing.
Yeah, there's a 0% accuracy level when somebody makes that statement to us. It has been a absolute. Not one single person has ever gone through our assessment process and not had sensitive data on their systems. There's always something somewhere. Whether it's one example is the company switched payroll providers, so they moved their employees over from ADP or one of those over to Paychex, right?
Right.
Well, this was 7 years ago. 7 years ago, and they had 30 employees on their list. They put together a nice little spreadsheet out of one payroll system, and then they sent that spreadsheet over to the new payroll system, and it was sitting in the vice president of operations downloads folder on her laptop from 7 years ago, and she had completely forgotten about it, right? So, and half those employees weren't even there anymore, but they still had home address, account number,
Right.
routing number, license, the driver's license, social security, like everything was in there. And I said, all you need is to go on social media, find out who this person's mother is, look up her maiden name on Facebook, and you own them. Like lock, stock, and barrel. You could own those people, right?
You
Um,
raised such a good point. It's no coincidence that control number one in CIS is know your assets. And know your assets doesn't just mean here's a list of serial numbers, it means know your data and where it is. And I think that part is not always remembered or thought about as seriously when you think about asset management. It's also data management. You know, you can't protect what you don't know is there. That's literally the first step and probably the most important step as far as this kind of implement. Right? We're thinking about risks, and we just said risk to what? Well, if the answer is risk to I don't know, that's not a good start. Um, really understand what you have and where it is, and that's one of the most difficult. It shouldn't be, but often is. I've been in the same position as you where I've walked into an environment and the answer to what's the most critical data is one of two things. Either we don't know or the equally unhelpful everything. And, it really takes some effort to think about what truly matters. And is it the stuff in the cloud? Is it the stuff on the local server? Is it hopefully not the stuff on somebody's desktop? Or we've had instances where it turned out the most critical machine in the entire company was the ops manager's desktop because it had the magic Excel sheet with the macro in it that the whole company ran on. Eh, Um, and the reality is, even though that's not a good thing, if you're doing a risk assessment, then you need to treat that desktop as a critical asset. Just it's that simple.
Yeah, and people have their proprietary ways of doing things, and this gets into the shadow IT area, right? So you
Yeah.
have when you're talking to a business owner and you're discussing shadow IT, like this is what you need to look at. You need to do data analysis, and a lot of the data analysis is going out and finding what's on those systems. So you got this operations manager's got a spreadsheet on his desktop with the macro that's operating the entire company. So we need to do a little bit more as far as protecting that machine and backing it up. Number one. Number two, let's maybe move that spreadsheet to a different spot. And number three is, should we really have the whole company running on a macro in an Excel spreadsheet in the first place, right? So there's like
Right.
layers to it
Right.
where you want to take care of the things that are a real problem and then move them closer to um, a better risk posture, right? But the data
Yeah.
analysis always ends up exposing something where the shadow IT is Susie at the front desk is your most loyal and long term employee, and without her, your business is screwed, right? Susie is your best employer, most loyal person, and she gets it done, right? She's the person in the office that gets it done. Susie is usually your biggest risk. Like she's usually your weakest link in the chain because Susie's doing more than anybody else in the office. She's flying through emails faster. She's getting more emails than a lot of other people. She's got more attachments to look at and click on. She's getting, a larger amount of important communications that somebody could target her for. But also, Susie probably has a couple cheat sheets because highly productive people use cheat sheets, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what they do.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I just want to have a quick reference. These are our 6 bank accounts. This is where the money goes when somebody puts something in escrow. This is where the money goes when we've got payments coming, full payments coming in, whatever. They'll have that list of stuff there, not because Susie is bad or she hates you. It's because Susie is trying to get her job done. And that's
Yeah.
really shadow IT. Those spreadsheets with or text documents or Word documents, and maybe they put a password on them, maybe they don't. But either way, it's not secure. Um, but it's really the people that are trying to do their job well that do the shadow IT stuff, and you don't find that without doing some data analysis on your network.
Yeah. That's a super important point. Like, we sometimes get into this mindset that employees or shadow IT are actively being malicious and trying to cause havoc. And the reality is that these are just employees trying to get their work done and trying to do it better and help the company ultimately, but just not doing it in the right way. And I love your example of shadow IT in this case being an employee who's doing her own thing in a way that's not documented and not following the written procedure. Normally, when we talk about shadow IT, we're talking about someone who's using Dropbox when the company standard is OneDrive, or uploading their documents to some Joe's online grammar checker that's really an information stealer or something, right? We vetted Grammarly, use that, and now we're using who knows what. Um, but shadow IT is not only using unsolicited service. That's definitely a part of it, but it's also going against IT policies in any way, right? Company policy is not to use this cheat sheet and have sensitive information sitting on a Word document on your desktop. There's ways to do that properly. And I'm sure that in that organization, somebody has told this person how to do that securely, and she did it her own way anyway. Um,
I mean, often there's no, WISP. We send out a WISP package. We call it the WISP Essentials, right? We update it every month and make sure that everything is solid. It's got the basic stuff: employee onboarding, employee offboarding, your written information security program, right? So we have that Essentials pack ready to go as soon as we start the onboarding process with the new client. They get that. Fill this out. Let us know what needs to change. These are the policies that we're going by, unless you say otherwise. And
mhm.
there's your WISP, right? We've updated with your name. There it is. And sometimes they go, oh, well, we already have these policies over here. Cool, great. Let's shuffle them into the deck and make sure everything is good. But a lot of these companies, we just assume when we walk in the door, if they've got less than 500 employees, they are probably not working on things like, written information security policies in a lot of ways,
Yeah.
unless they're regulated by the SEC or FTC or something like that. Um, I haven't seen a lot of businesses who we walk in and say, "Hey, can we see your cybersecurity policies or your IT policies?" And most of the time, the answer is, "What?"
And even then, it's probably, they pulled the templates down from some site where it says, put your company name here and here's your policy. And it's not really uh, customized or really thought about with what you're trying to protect in mind. It's just, well, our regulation says we have to have a policy. So here one is, it says Acme Corp on it, and we're good to go. And then employees read these things or skim them, might be a generous way of putting it. They kind of go through it, click the box, and then promptly forget about everything that they ever read. Um, I'm guilty of this too, right? I write policies all the time, and those ones I kind of remember. But if I didn't write it myself, there's a 50-50 shot I'll remember it. And so this leads to, there's a point to this, and what I like to say is that it's our job as practitioners to make doing the right thing the easy way, right? That the path of least resistance should be to do things the right and secure way. And so in what we just talked about, our shadow IT example with the stereotypical grammar checker rogue website, um, it's on us to make sure that Grammarly is the only grammar checker website you can access as an employee, right? Remove any ability or temptation to do things the wrong way as much as possible, or a Firefox or Chrome extension that's a adware, one of those shopping assistant things that you see on probably half the employees' computers around. It's not too hard to manage stuff like that via policy, and combined with continuing to preach about secure practices and doing things the right way and raising awareness, just make it easy for them to do what they need to do and hard for them to not do the right thing. Easier said than done at times, but I think that mindset and framing it that way makes our job more effective as a goal, right? It's kind of one of those unattainable goals, right? We can't make our systems completely safe for our employees, but if we go into security decisions thinking that it's our job to do that and get as close as we can, we do make it easier and better.
Yeah, and to your point, making it a path of least resistance. We use a password vault, Keeper Security.
Mm-hmm.
Keeper is great. We love it. There's a lot of competitors out there. There's a lot of different options for that. We're tool agnostic, generally speaking, but Keeper is just the one that we use now because right now we feel they're the best, right? And we did skip over because LastPass was in the running when we were selecting our tools on the last go round. So luckily for us, the hackers went after LastPass instead of going after Keeper on this last go round. So, but Keeper is one of those tools where it's on my screen right now. Like you've got the web extensions, you've got the vault logged in, and I had a conversation with a headmaster at a school yesterday, and she said, I really hate this Keeper thing. Right? We've been onboarding them for a few weeks, and she's like, this Keeper thing drives me crazy. And I said, well, what you need is to get on the phone with our help desk, tell them that you hate Keeper. I said the solution to that problem is more training, because Keeper should not be your password vault. Just insert password vault here. Should not be a burden to you.
Yes.
What that should be is your memory bank for all your passwords. We have to use 12 character passwords, 16 character passwords. There's all these requirements for them. This is really a pain in the butt. Like, this is a nightmare. I don't even know my passwords. I don't type my passwords in. I use my Keeper password vault. It's on my phone. It's on my computer. It's, we've got all of our multi-factor authentication set up for it. Obviously, we've got, another app that we use for that also. So we've got these layers of security for Keeper. But once I log into my machine to get started, I open up Keeper, and there's all your links for everything. So there's no need to even have bookmarks in any of your web browsers anymore, because you can literally launch your applications, you can launch your websites, you can launch whatever your cloud applications are right from Keeper. So And I've had people tell me over and over again, like, hey, listen, I really hate this program. I really don't like it. But then you spend 20 minutes with them showing them the proper way to use it, and then suddenly they're a big fan. And that's our job. We've got to make sure that that our end users. So that's our job.
Exactly.
We've got to make sure that these end users know how to use the tools. Otherwise, they're useless. So our onboarding process when a customer hires a new employee, part of that process is end user training. Like they're one on one with our team, getting them up to date on the policies, procedures. At that point, we do our own training, treat them just like we're an IT department for their company, right?
Right? It's amazing. And password managers are a perfect example of what we were just talking about with making the easy thing or making the right thing the easy thing, in that you roll out the password manager, you roll out the Keeper browser extension or the Keeper desktop app, whichever they're using, and then you turn off the ability to save passwords in Firefox and Edge and Chrome and all the browsers.
And wipe out the old ones. And wipe out the old ones. Get rid of all that. Yeah.
Right, remove the temptation to hit yes on that password, save password dialog box that comes up, and doing things like that is kind of what I mean by making things the easy thing the right thing, or the right thing the easy thing. And the LastPass issue actually gave us a good opportunity, right? So, I mean, on the one hand, yes, it's nice to be able to say, thankfully, the one that I use wasn't hit. But when we go back to talking about, finding out before or finding out during, it's a great chance to say, okay, what if next time it is Keeper? What's the plan, right? How are we going to handle that?
Yeah, and we had those conversations also. What is our backup to Keeper? Where how are we going to be able to cycle through this? How are we going to communicate to our end users that we're providing Keeper to, right?
Right.
We had Keeper had an outage. I think they were down for like 20 minutes or something the other day, a few weeks ago, and we sent out a full report to everybody on the system, like, hey, Keeper was down. It was like 3 o'clock on a Friday, so that could often be that would be a time where everybody's just trying to wrap up their day and get done, and not having access to your passwords for 20 minutes could be a pain in the butt for some people, right? So, they got informed. Like, here's the deal: Keeper was down for 20 minutes. Last time this happened at this length of time was 2 years ago, right? So, like, communicating with your users and having them understand, you know, these tools are operated and built by humans, and they are not perfect, and they can go down, and there are things that could cause delays. But the issues that you have from time to time with a well-run company like LastPass or like Keeper is the benefits outweigh the downside 1,000-fold.
Agreed.
Because
Agreed for
having a
sure.
spreadsheet on your computer get stolen, that's a major problem. And even when the LastPass, and I don't know a lot about the LastPass attack, and what they got, but the attitude seemed to be from LastPass was, well, you got the information, but it's encrypted, and you're not going to be able to do much with it, right?
Yes, that was the report, and I haven't heard differently that anything was done with it.
Yeah. So, and another one is we never wag our finger at anybody for choosing a tool, because you never know when it's going to happen to you. And like the last couple of major things were the LastPass breach, and then the 3CX thing. That was a big deal. But there's a lot of peer groups that we're in, and like a lot of the IT guys jump in there and go, "Oh, hey, 3CX got hacked. Glad we don't use them," or whatever. And I'm like,
Right, I
that's
know.
that's bad karma. Like, I just because you never know when you're going to get hit, and I don't like to talk a whole
Right?
lot. I don't like to talk a whole lot about what systems we use or whatever, because but we change all the time. Like, we're always setting up something new, something different, changing services, changing software providers or whatever. Because as soon as somebody has something better, we're going to go get that for our customers.
Yeah, and it's all of these things are fantastic opportunities. So, when we're talking about Keeper or anyone like them having an outage, it's going to sound a little dry, but if you're thinking about doing more mature and formal risk assessments like a business impact analysis, part of that is thinking about, okay, what do I do if Keeper is down for 20 hours instead of 20 minutes? Do I have a plan in place? Do I have break glass accounts that don't exist in Keeper that are in the fireproof safe somewhere, or whatever the appropriate thing is for the service you're using? And all of these things are opportunities to think about, what would I do if, right? Continually ask yourself these what happens if questions and have an answer for them. Even if you're not happy with what the answer is yet, know where you stand on things, right? So the answer for some services might be, if Keeper goes down, like, I'm toast. I can't do anything. At least be aware of that. And with 3CX, it's another good opportunity to think about, okay, I wasn't a 3CX customer. Do I know what would happen if the phone system I do use this happened to, or some other application had a supply chain issue? What would I do? How would I handle that? These are all just great chances to, first, right? I mean, you can be a little thankful it wasn't your system that you used that had the impact, but right after you finish saying, I'm glad we don't use 3CX, say, okay, we do use this. What happens when this one has the issue? And treat it as an opportunity for you, a discussion between you and your IT provider or internal IT, depending on the context, and just think about what that would look like, what that response would be.
Yeah, and it's, the break glass accounts and the identity verification when people are calling the help desk, the emergency backups for um, the internal stuff at the managed services provider. It's those sorts of things that really sets your MSSPs aside, apart from just the standard MSP. And when I talk to people about, and we talk to a lot of other MSP owners, right? I'm in a lot of groups where we're always talking to those guys, and I tend to be the one to open a can of worms and go. So when somebody calls your help desk from XYZ Corporation, um, how do you know it's them, right? How do you
Mm-hmm.
know when Bill calls from, Bill's plumbing distribution, and he needs his password reset for his email? How does your help desk person know that it's actually Bill on the phone? They check the list. He's identified himself verbally, but you check the list, and he's one of the authorized people who can make these changes and stuff. But how do you really know it's Bill? And most of the time, the MSP goes, "Let's talk about something else, right? Like let's just talk about something else, right?" So it's difficult to go in and sell managed services at $40 a seat when you're paying for tools like a quick pass application or something like that that you
Right.
have integrated, where your client has to give you a code, right? Like you're going to basically multi-factor authentication when you call the help desk, right? Uh,
Right.
what happens to my data when everybody or say Derek gets hit by a bus, right? Like what happens to my passwords, my information, if the owner of your company gets hit by a bus? What is, like, how does all that work? How does that structure break down, right? What happens to this MSP when somebody's dead? How do I get my passwords back from them? Do I have a break glass account? Like those sorts of things that go into place, right? So there's all these different solutions that a typical IT provider usually isn't thinking about. It's like, hey, yeah, we're going to get to your help desk call within 15 minutes or 45 minutes or 4 hours or whatever it is. And we're 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 366 days a leap year. There's things that they focus on. I mean, all of our guys are CompTIA A plus certified. We're a Microsoft partner or a Google partner, whatever. There's all these things that they're
Right.
focused
Right.
on. And really, when it comes down to it, is everybody has that stuff. Everybody is insured. Everybody has certifications. Everybody has all that. It's really, you know, working with a provider that's really paying attention to what risk they pose to your business also, and having those conversations with you, right? Like if I get hit by a bus, an absolute worst case scenario, this is the lawyer who handles my affairs, right?
Right. No,
Like
you nailed it.
like this guy has in a vault, he's got access to bank accounts, he's got access to all this stuff, and this is what happens to my business when I'm dead. And that concerns my customers because I have their information. I have a lot of important information that they're going to need from me, right? So if something happens, here is your break glass account. Once you once you log into this account, you are in breach of contract, right?
Yes.
You just fired us, right? You're in breach of contract. You might even owe us money for logging into that account and canceling your contract early. So do not use this unless someone is dead, right? But
No, you totally nailed it.
if you haven't had that conversation with your IT professional, it's something you should have, because we go into situations where we are cleaning up messes after somebody has been hit by a bus, and
Right?
it's
You're trying to break into the client to get their stuff back.
yeah, and it happens all the time. I have got one of our longtime clients when we were first starting up. I had gone in and talked to him about their IT stuff and say, listen, our guy is great. He's a great customer of ours. We got a long-term relationship, and everything is good. And I said, well, second opinion is always good. It's always good to have someone in your back pocket. And it was 3 months later, and the poor gentleman had a heart attack and passed away. And I was like, this is not how I like getting customers. That's not what I meant to happen, right? But
Right,
but
right.
but the point is that they didn't have any passwords, they didn't have any access to anything, and that you bringing up the break glass thing is I'm glad you brought it up, because this is a serious issue. Business owners often don't have control of these situations when something happens to their IT professional, and often it's their brother's ex-wife's cousin's nephew who has a roommate in college who's a computer genius, and he's taking care of things at the office, right? So like you want to make sure you have control in the worst case scenario.
A good w- the way I like to think about it is that the kinds of discussions we're having about break glass to our own systems, and right, can we get into things if keeper goes down, or if you're a heavy SSO user, do you have a way to get in if your SSO system goes down, like a password in a safe or something like that. Encourage your clients to have those conversations about you. And I recognize it's a scary thing if it's an organization that's not used to thinking that way. But when I was doing this, I would remind clients that ultimately this is all your stuff. We're here to help manage it. We're here to help you secure things and think about decisions you need to make. But ultimately, this is your data and your business. And there's no way that I'm going to put you, client, in a position to not be able to survive without me. It would just be totally unethical of me to do so. And it can be a scary prospect if you're an MSP that's used to locking clients out, but you nailed it and mentioned the strategy to that. When the break glass accounts gets used, there need to be alarm bells going off, and you almost picture like the little siren coming down from the ceiling, right? Somebody used the break glass account, and right, it might be end of contract, it might be a fee, whatever you want to negotiate between you and your client. They might have internal IT that you have, that has different permissions and different kinds of agreements, but everyone just needs to be on the same page with that stuff. And as long as you and the client agree on how that's going to work, then any answer almost is okay to agree. Just to agree and be on the same page with it. But super valid point. Um, your clients should be able to survive without you. You should not be in a position to be holding your clients hostage. If you have a billing dispute, let legal handle that. Don't be holding networks hostage. I'm a big believer in not doing things like we're not going to release your domain or we're not going to release your 365 tenant. I'm actually not a believer in hosting domains for clients anyway. I prefer to register them in their name. Um, yeah, I know some don't like that.
Well, we
Uh,
had a dispute with a client a couple months ago, and it was, you know, you want to get them out as fast as you can, get them all the information, get them all, and the new IT guy, the new IT company who was coming in was like, oh, this is actually like you guys are great. Like, thanks for
right.
handling all this stuff. Like, we were on him. Like, hey, have you gotten this set up yet? We need to migrate this information over or whatever, right? So, and he was like, oh, you guys are. This is like really helpful. I know that there's some billing stuff going on here and whatever, but like, hey, thanks for taking care of this. And it's like, you know, keeping a customer by or holding somebody hostage. On the other side of that coin, we also have a client that we're taking over, and the old IT company says they owe them $18,000 or something, and they're like, we already paid these invoices, and I'm like kind of looking at it going, hey, you guys handle all that on your own, but we need access to your router, right? We need
Yeah,
access to
that's
your
between
camera
you and them.
systems.
Don't get me involved.
Yeah, we need access to your camera systems. We need access to your router. All the computers in your student laboratory are locked down with an admin password that we don't know. So, but the IT company wouldn't turn it over. And it's, the lawyers are talking about criminal charges and things like that. It's like, man, if you're an MSP, have that break glass, even if you're not doing cybersecurity stuff for the clients, have that conversation with them. If you have a small business and you're working with an MSP, have that conversation. If they haven't brought it up
Yeah.
yet, you bring it up, talk to them about it. So I love you. You're great. We've been working together 20 years, never going anywhere else. But what happens when you drop dead? Because
Yeah.
it happens all the time. So, talking about the cybercrime and those kinds of risks and those kinds of threats, when you're looking at this from a cyber risk management standpoint, it's all risk, right? Like you said, it's not in a vacuum, right? You've got these systems that are in place that will either make or break your business, and you have to think about all the things that are attached to them that could screw you.
I sometimes like to think about, if you go back to security bases like the CIA triad, and we'll think about as availability often being the forgotten leg of the CIA triad. Security is so cool. We're all talking about hacking and breaking into stuff and protecting and antivirus and everything. And we forget sometimes that equally important are controls around availability, things like backups and things like business continuity procedures and things to help um, excuse me, things to help make sure that you can access your own data when you need to. And all the stuff we're talking about is about availability, making sure that the systems and assets that clients have, they can use them without us, and without any specific passwords, or any any adhere or hindrance to that. It's such a big important topic, and it gets lost in the sea of new vulns and exploits that come out, because they're exciting. The fear sells, and the fear of not being able to use your own equipment even in the absence of a threat actor is just as valid. Really, really good conversation.
Yeah, and I always talk to people about like what are the context of your conversations with your IT guy. You cannot assume that they have anything covered if you haven't specifically talked to them about it.
Hmm.
And asking, oh, we got our cybersecurity stuff covered. We're great. Well, what's your breach response plan? Well, we've got one. All right, so you should know off the top of your head. If you walk into your office tomorrow and your screen says you've been hacked and you have to send $1 million in Bitcoin to this address, or we're not going to give your data back. What's your first step? Uh, uh, you don't have a breach response plan, right? Like
Right,
everybody should
right.
know what to do, right? Everybody should already know what to do in the context of your business and what data is where. And if there's any individual differences between end users, they should have that training when they get onboarded, whether it's a new employee or a new customer, and they should have those reviews in their security awareness training. Like everybody should know what's
Exactly.
going on, and there's no point in having a fire extinguisher that's locked in a closet in the back that nobody knows is there, because when you have a fire, nobody's going to be able to use it, right? So
Right.
having that breach response plan. And if you've never heard the words breach response plan, then your IT guy is probably not working on that stuff. I'm not saying he's a bad guy. I'm not saying he's not even a fantastic IT guy. It's just not an area that he's well versed in or working on in the context of your business. If you don't know what you're going to do when he gets in a motorcycle accident and is no longer with us, that's a problem. That's a conversation that you need to be having. At some point in the first year of your relationship with a new IT company, new provider, all of these things should be covered because it takes time. You
Right.
don't you don't want to lock a CEO in an office and talk to him for 3 or 4 days about all the bad things that are going to happen to their business. You got to have to do this in phases, right? So, um,
Agreed.
But these
Agreed.
are, you
Or
know,
if you don't have your own breach response plan, and your idea of breach response is I just call my MSP and don't have any documents or policies of my own, that's equally bad, right? You name the MSP in your breach response plan, but you still need to have one.
yeah. And it's conversations that need to happen. And I feel like the most important job guys like you and guys like I have right now is making sure that we're putting this in a context where a business owner understands, somebody who's on the board of directors for a 500 employee banking operation, or a lady who's been running a little 5 employee tire shop in Florida for 30
Right.
years.
Right.
Both of those people need to understand what the risks are to those businesses, because, as you and I both know, these threats scale with the business. The cost
Mm-hmm.
of doing a data breach grows with the business. And another example is Joe Sullivan. Does that name ring a bell? Joe Sullivan's the former chief information security officer of Uber. Like, they just convicted him on October 7th for not reporting a data breach, right? Because when
Yeah.
Uber
Yeah.
when he found out when they got breached and he found out what the cost was going to be, it was going to be in the billions with a B. And he said, hey, maybe we'll just sweep this one under the rug, and it'll be interesting to see how much jail time he gets. But the point is, it doesn't matter how big your business is. It doesn't matter how small your business is. It's something that needs to be thought about. These are conversations that need to happen with your IT provider. If you don't have one, get one and bring it up first. Bring up the cybersecurity first. I had an appointment yesterday with a company. The guy walked in and just started saying, we've got a new startup. We're buying up businesses. We got to make sure all of our T's are crossed and our I's are dotted with compliance, cybersecurity. We've got private equity investment money. We want to make sure it doesn't get stolen. I said, all right, you're speaking our language here. Like, this is what we do. So if your cybersecurity people or your IT people aren't involving you in those conversations, insert
Yes.
yourself into them.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, what we're doing is arming businesses with the questions to ask, and the answers will be different for everyone. The risks are different. The necessary controls, believe it or not, are different. There's not a implement all this stuff and now you're secure list anywhere. I wish there was. Our jobs would be a lot easier. Easier. It just doesn't work that way. Um, so our role is to help business owners understand the things to be asking about and the questions to ask not only their IT providers but themselves, right? So in either the large corporate entity or the small tire shop, only that business owner can answer the question of what is most critical to my business and how should I spend my limited security budget on protecting it. No IT person, internal or MSP, can answer that for them. We can make educated guesses and put an answer out and say, is this yes or no the right path for you? But ultimately, that needs to be step one. Where's my stuff? What's most important? And, what do you want to spend protecting? Um, it's kind of, I don't want to say amazing, but somewhat surprising to see how frequently there's this idea of everything is treated the same and just protect everything, and that really just doesn't work. Like we talked about earlier in this discussion, the world doesn't work that way.
Yeah, and there's no reason necessarily to have encryption and full image backups on the front counter of a tire shop's workstations up there. You know, you're backing up the server, you're encrypting the data there. Just make sure there's nothing on those computers, right? So you don't have to
Yeah,
walk in and just blanket treat that whole entire facility like you would a doctor's office or a law office or something like that, where there could be sensitive information on every computer, right? Like, secure the stuff, but you don't have to put everything everywhere all the time. And
yeah, exactly. And
there's different levels of compliance. You want to make sure you're compliant with your insurance, right? Because they're the ones who are going to pay for it or not pay for it based on your compliance. And then make sure your regulatory boxes are checked. And then after those two things are done, promoting a culture of cybersecurity and other types of security awareness too, right? Like, don't
mhm.
just talk about not clicking emails, right? Think about when you're leaving the office building and you're walking across the parking lot at night, right? Like, the buddy system, things like that, right? Being aware of just security in general, but putting cybersecurity into that same category. Like, I think really that's what we need to promote in our field, is making sure people understand that this is not just about securing a computer or securing data or securing a business. At this point, cybersecurity is doing the job of securing society, because your physical security is only as good as your cybersecurity. Your financial security is only as good as your cybersecurity. And whatever plans you have to scale up, down, retire, whatever you're thinking you're going to do, whatever those plans are only as good as your technology planning, right? So
Yeah, they're all connected
if you
now.
don't have that mapped out with your future plans, you've got no plan.
It's a mindset, right? It is the phrase I always come back to. It's a resilience mindset. And when you're thinking about anything related to cyber, it's thinking about what are the potential implications of this. And you raise a good point with the awareness training. And if you're spending all of your time thinking about, is this link safe to click on? There are a few issues with that. One is you're not getting to the root of the issue, and two is no matter how many training videos you watch, your front desk employee is not qualified to know the difference anyway. They can make a guess for a really obvious one, but I don't know about you. Even you or me sometimes, unless I open the link in a sandbox, I can't tell for sure. And we're sitting here talking about having non-technical people try and figure it out, and it goes back to our defense in depth conversation. We should, yes, be raising awareness about things like that, but more importantly, making sure that these systems are overall resilient to, okay, I did click on a link with points to some malicious website. What other controls are in place so that when that happens, because it will, that the impact won't be catastrophic, right? The DNS check, DNS filtering, or proper endpoint protection, or just all that kind of stuff that goes in place to be there when someone inevitably does mess up. Because asking our employees to become qualified to differentiate between good and bad links is a losing proposition. Like it's good, it's helpful to do, but it's not the answer. It's part of the answer.
Yeah, Susie at the front desk is not a cybersecurity expert. You can't expect her to become one in the context of doing her job on a day-to-day basis, and also
Right.
like trying
Right.
to learn about this stuff and get some master's degree in cybersecurity. But the point is making sure that Susie at least is aware of things that can happen and the consequences of those
Yes.
things, and also how to avoid it, right? And I always tell my clients, like, gamify this, like, make it a game, right? Make something. And we often go in and I'll walk into an office, a meeting with somebody, and somebody in the office will recognize me from the IT company. Hey, did you guys send out a phishing email this week? Because I got one and it was suspicious and I didn't click on it, so I'll get a good score this week, right? So like I
Right.
saw sometimes I'll say I don't know, I don't know if we did one this week or not, or you know yeah, we did send one, but just good job, pay attention to it. But we're constantly scheming with different ways to get people to click on our phishing links. And one of my favorite examples is if we're dealing with a school. I'm giving away my secret sauce if any of the future school teacher customers are watching this, but we're dealing with a school, and I'll put in like hey, Microsoft and Domino's Pizza are teaming up to get your class a free pizza, right? And here's a photo of the Domino's pizza that's right by your school. Here's the picture of the restaurant. You've probably seen it before, right? There's the picture of the Domino's. We're teaming up with Microsoft. Just log in here with your Microsoft account to redeem your $50 gift card or whatever it is, right? And
I bet you get a ton of
and
hits
they
on
do
that.
it. They do it because they want to get a pizza for their kids, right? But what you want to teach them from that is Microsoft is never going to ask you for this information ever, right?
Yes.
And when you go and you're talking to somebody, it's not the actual mechanics of that email. It's the information that they're asking for. So understanding, the keys that you're holding here to your email account, we really want you to understand what those gain access to. and understand also why someone else might want that, right? So when you've educated somebody to the point where you guys are using Salesforce, you've got patient care, patient record software, you've got all these different things. I mean, especially if God forbid it's all set up under single sign-on. If somebody gets your email account, they get into all of that.
Mm-hmm.
So, just kind of building that awareness in and going, I'm not Domino's Pizza. Like, why would they want my Microsoft? No, this is not right. They're asking for the keys to everything in the entire company. I'm not putting this in here, right? So
Right.
like training them from that example, not like, hey, look for a misspelling of Microsoft. Make sure it's the O in soft is a O and not a zero or something like
Right.
that.
The
Or something.
RNM stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So like not paying, talk about that stuff, but have a stronger focus on how important these credentials are and what it gets you into and how it's all connected, so that when somebody walks in and goes, hey, there's a free car wash coupon, log in with your Microsoft account. They go, I'm not giving you the keys to my house so you can send me a free pizza. I'm not doing it, or a free
Right.
car wash.
Teach and demonstrate the principles. In your example, we're gamifying it and everyone's getting excited. I found the phishing email, which is awesome, except if they've become so good at identifying your phishing emails that they think, oh, it doesn't look like that one, now it's legit. And so, to your point, explaining and getting everyone into the mindset of, if I click on something and it asks for creds, stop. Then it doesn't matter where it came from.
Yeah, nobody's going to ask for your credentials legitimately ever. So, Resilience Rocket starts when? When is your first episode coming out?
So we kind of soft released the first episode a week or two, but like every podcast, the first episode was like, if I could go back and delete that from history, I might do it.
They're always garbage. We're still doing garbage here, but it's good information.
And that's the thing. I said, look, the information is good and valid. The production, yeah, not so good. So we're looking to release episodes roughly weekly going forward. I'll probably post the next one tomorrow, and mostly audio content. I'll be doing some video type content, but you can find it on Spotify, Apple, and occasionally I'll post a LinkedIn post as well with it.
I've found I'm a huge podcast fan, so I enjoy making the podcast, but I always look for content and conversation. Like I've listened to other podcasts where they're literally in a car driving somewhere, and it's two people that you want to hear talk, and they're recording it on an iPhone and they post it as a podcast. And I think it's audio production is good. We're both you're doing this from your house, I'm doing this from my house, but I think it's less important like how crisp and clear the audio is, and it's more important what we're talking about, and then we're kind of bringing the horses to the water and then hoping that they drink. So anyway, Matt, really nice meeting you, sir. I think we'll probably be talking in the future. And I'd love to talk to you more about any future developments with Resilience Rocket and Connectwise.
Yeah, great to meet you too. Thanks for having me on. I look forward to doing it again in the future.